is a story about a chicken and a pig that were walking by a church one day talking about world hunger. And the chicken looked at the pig and suggested that between their two species, everyone in the world could enjoy a good breakfast of bacon and eggs every morning. Pig thought about that for a moment and said, well, that's okay for you to say, because for you, that's just a contribution. But for me, that's total commitment. We are. Over the next couple weeks, we're going to be spending some time talking about that phrase. We are. We are in a community called Geary. We are in a lush valley on the dry end of the western part of the state. We are closer to 4 other state capitals than our own. And for the most part, we are big Nebraska fans, with some exceptions. And we are dependent on agriculture. And we know that if it wasn't for irrigation, it would be a struggle every year. Now, this tells us a lot about our community, but who are we as a church? Well, we are 128 years old. We worship in a building 65 years old, in a community almost as old as our congregation. And we are tied to our history. When I walk my dogs on M Street, I often envision myself walking that same path with those along the Oregon Trail. Now, these things are obvious. The tourist maps show that. The geography tells us where we are. A drive out into the country time, we can see our dependence on agriculture. And we look at the historical maps. No, in fact, all we need to do is look at the monument and we know our tie to history. But who are we as a people? As the ones sitting in the pews, who come to worship, who put money into the offering plate, who give of their time to important causes. This sense of identity and purpose, and why we come to give of our time and talent, and yes, our dollars, of what we are. This is what we're going to be examining these next couple weeks. Today, we are a giving person. Nina Peterson is a volunteer at Sanford Hospital in California, and she tells the story about a little girl named Liza. Liza suffered from a rare and serious disease, and her only chance of recovery was from a blood transfusion from her 5-year-old little brother, who also had the disease but miraculously survived it, and thus had antibodies. And so the doctors went to her little brother and asked him if he would be willing to give of his blood to his sister. And he hesitated just for a brief moment, and with a deep breath he says, yes, I'll do it if it will save Liza. Well, the transfusion progressed beautifully. As the brother and sister sat side by side in the hospital room, everyone was smiling, especially as the color was returning to Liza's face. And then they noticed around the same time that the little boy became a bit pale, and he wasn't smiling anymore. And finally he looked up at the doctor and he says, will I die right away? For the little boy thought he was going to have to give all of his blood to his sister. Now, I like to believe that about ourselves, that when called upon, that we'd be like the pig, total commitment, or we'd be like the boy and offer all of our blood. But in reality, giving is a little bit harder. I love history. I was a history major in college. Today it is still my #1 interest. And I find history to be vital to understand a culture and a people and why we do the things that we do. Let me share a story with you. I know of a church that experienced incredible growth. The worship space and the Sunday school all became too full. It was apparent that the church needed to add on or just build anew. Well, the existing structure of the church was of wood, and when they made the decision to build anew, they decided to go with a brick structure. Brick established something stronger. It would represent a beacon of light to the community, showed just how vital its ministry was to the surrounding area. Now, the grand plan was to build the sanctuary in one direction and to put the education wing and the offices in another direction, perpendicular to it. And so they raised the money and they built this beautiful worship structure. In fact, it doubled the amount of people that they could fit into worship. And then when they were getting ready to go in the next direction with the education wing, well, the plans kind of stopped. People didn't have the money. And they still had their old building, so they thought, we'll just use that for Sunday school space. It was a temporary solution, but it would be okay for now. We'll just continue to have those plans. We'll continue to raise money. Someday in the future, we will build that direction. The future would happen. It just wouldn't happen today. And the plans were laid out to add on. And so instead of where the part was going to be added on, they just kind of put some cinder block. In fact, we have a picture of it right here. It is our church. This is the brick structure right here. And this is cinder block. And right here, I don't know which, this kind of tar paper or wood or whatever. And this is rebar. The plans were always there to add on. The pastor of the church at the time in the 1950s was Henry Beatty. And I actually knew Henry Beatty. I worked with him when I was the pastor, or when I was an intern at Lincoln First United Methodist Church, and Henry was a minister of evangelism there. And so it was a delight to come across a quote from Henry Beatty when he was the pastor here. In 1958, in a booklet called To Give Is to Live, he writes, "Help bring this financial program into reality by cheerfully, prayerfully doing your share. All our available space has been exhausted. Our church school operates under crippling pressure." And then the booklet contained the church's budget and stated that there was a debt of $15,500 on the sanctuary. And then just 1 year later, the church had paid off the sanctuary debt and raised a significant portion for the education wing. And in the dedication booklet for the sanctuary, the Reverend Beatty wrote, "The dedication of our sanctuary today brings to actuality only part of our master plan for one of Nebraska Methodism's most beautiful church plants. Obviously, the construction of the $125,000 educational annex, for which we have just finished a splendid campaign in stewardship, calls our attention to the unfinished business before us. In response to the demand from 1 Chronicles that we build a house for the glory of God, we would respond prayerfully. We would be building temples still undone." Now, if you had the pleasure to know Henry, you know that he had a way with words. Can I get an amen there? For those of you who know that Henry, he had a way with words. But the most interesting part is that educational wing that we now see, it took him 9 years to build after this part was done. And it took Henry Beatty's leadership to provide a church with a sense of vision to complete the project. It was a belief in something greater. Through fundraisers and campaigns and pledges, we renewed our sense of who we were. This, my friends, is who we are. We are a giving people. Now, how do I know this? Why do I believe this? What makes me believe that this statement is true? Well, a couple months ago, you may remember that each one of you was given a $5 bill. And your job was to do whatever you wanted with it, but just do something good. And tell us the story of what you've done with it. I had some wonderful stories. I was told one person gave it to a neighbor. And another person decided to pay it forward by paying for the lunch of someone in line behind them. One person gave it to a coworker because they knew that coworker needed it. Many of you just knew of the work of the church. You put it right back into the offering plate. You knew that we could do well with it. And one story, this person wrote, "Dear Seth, here's the story of the $5. I used it to buy rotisserie chicken and took it to my father-in-law in honor of his wife. My brother-in-law was there and we sat down to eat. I felt like I was able to support my brother-in-law as a caregiver. He had a box of pictures for me. He's been going through my mother-in-law's things. When I got home, I missed a call from the lady who was selling things for me. When I was able to call her back, she said, it was actually good that I wasn't there to answer my phone. Remember, she had taken that $5 to go visit her father-in-law. It was good that I wasn't there to answer my phone the first time, for the delay allowed her to get full price for the item I was selling. She said it must have been a God thing. She obviously did not know anything about that $5 bill. You know, I hear these stories, and I do believe that it is a God thing with the blessings that we have. Now we're going to hear another story, and this actually, as we share in the scripture for today, is going to be a bit participatory. So we invite you to turn to page 826.
This is a responsive reading, and if you will follow along, we are reading today from Psalms 104, 24, 35b. We'll start with Psalms. Or did you want to read those? Verse 24. You want to start or do you?
Yeah, let's do it.
We'll do it all. Change.
Okay.
There's a lot of changes this morning. Okay. We'll start at the beginning of Psalm 104. Bless the Lord, O my soul.
O Lord, my God, you are very great.
You are clothed with honor and majesty, and cover yourself with light as with a garment.
You have stretched out the heavens like a tent, and have laid the beams of your chambers on waters.
You make the clouds your chariot, and ride on the wings of the wind.
You make the winds your messengers, fire and flame your ministers.
You set the earth on its foundations, so that it should never be shaken.
You cover it with the deep as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains.
And your rebuke they fled.
At the sound of your thunder they took flight.
They rose up to the mountains, ran down to the valleys, to the place which you appointed for them.
You set a bound which they should not pass, so that they might not again cover the earth.
You make springs gush forth in the valleys. They flow between the hills.
They give drink to every beast of the field. The wild asses quench their thirst.
Above the springs the birds of the air have their nests. They sing among the branches.
From your lofty place you water the mountains. With the fruit of your work the earth is satisfied.
O Lord, how manifold are your works.
In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures.
Yonder is the sea, great and wide.
Creeping things innumerable are there. Living things both small and great.
There go the ships, and with them the monster of the sea, whom you formed to play in it.
These all look to you. You give them their food in due season.
When you give to them, they gather it.
When you open your hand, they are filled with good things.
When you hide your face, they are dismayed.
When you take away their breath, they die and return to their dust.
When you send forth your spirit, they are created.
And you renew the face of the ground.
May the glory of the Lord endure forever. May the Lord rejoice in his works.
Who looks on the earth and it trembles, who touches the mountains and they smoke.
I will sing to the Lord as long as I live.
I will sing praise to my God while I have being.
May my meditation be pleasing to the Lord, in whom I rejoice.
Let sinners be consumed from the earth, and let the wicked be no more.
Bless the Lord, O my soul.
Praise the Lord. Thank you for that leadership. Appreciate it. You know, the book of Psalms is quite interesting. Each psalm represents a different emotion. As you turn to the Psalms, you're going to find a discussion of joy. There's going to be some about pain. Some of them will talk about suffering, and others will focus on happiness, to name just a few. Each of these Psalms is unique. And the history of the Psalms is quite special. If you were having a bad day, or going through suffering, or just angry with God, you would go into the synagogue or to the temple. You would go up to the leader of the congregation. You would explain to them what was going on, and they would choose maybe a psalm such as Psalm 22. Now, this one is made quite famous because the beginning actually is the last words of Jesus. My God, why have you forsaken me? Maybe you're having a good day. It's a wonderful blessing that day. And you just feel like you want to feel closer to God and be comforted. And you go into the synagogue to the leader of the congregation, and instead of choosing Psalm 22, because that's inappropriate, they would choose the next one, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Each psalm deals with a unique situation. And today, I still recommend the Psalms to people no matter what is going on with you, because you are going to find one to react to what is in your unique situation. Psalm 104 that we just shared here is a passage about incredible blessings, about what God has done for you, and about being thankful that we are alive and have the ability to give back. Think about it. Have the ability to give back. With a roof over our heads and the food that we eat, we know that God is great, and in this psalm, we are thankful to God for that reason. This psalm is chosen because indeed we are a giving people. There was once a man by the name of George Thomas. He was a pastor of a small New England town. One Easter Sunday morning, he came to church carrying a rusty, bent old bird cage set by the pulpit. Several eyebrows were raised, and as if in response, Pastor Thomas began to speak. I was walking through town yesterday when I saw a young boy coming toward me swinging this bird cage, he said. On the bottom of the cage were 3 little wild birds shivering with cold and fright. I stopped the lad and asked, "What you got there, son?" "Just some old birds," came the reply. "What are you going to do with them?" I asked. "Take them home and have fun with them," he answered. "I'm going to tease them and pull out their feathers to make them fight. I'm going to have a really good time." "But you'll get tired of those birds sooner or later. What will you do then?" "Oh, I got some cats," said the little boy. "They like birds. I'll take them to them." The pastor was silent for a moment. "How much do you want for those birds, son?" "Huh? Why, you don't want them birds, mister. They're just plain old field birds. They don't sing. They ain't even pretty." "How much?" the pastor asked again. The boy sized up the pastor as if he were crazy and said, $10. The pastor reached in his pocket, took out a $10 bill, placed it in the boy's hand. In a flash, the boy was gone. The pastor picked up the cage, gently carried it to the end of the alley. There was a tree with a grassy spot, and kind of gently tapping the cage, made sure that all 3 of the birds got out. Well, that explained the empty bird cage next to the pulpit. And then the pastor told this story. One day, Satan and Jesus were having a conversation. Satan had just come from the Garden of Eden. And he was gloating and said, "Yes, sir, I just caught the world full of people down there. Set me a trap, used bait I knew they couldn't resist. Got them all. What are you going to do with them?" Jesus asked. Satan replied, "Oh, I'm going to have fun. I'm going to teach them how to marry and divorce each other. How to hate and abuse each other. How to drink, smoke, and curse. I'm going to teach them how to invent guns and bombs and kill each other. I'm going to have fun." "And what will you do when you get done with them?" Jesus asked. "Oh, I'll kill them," Satan glared proudly. "How much do you want for them?" Jesus asked. Oh, you don't want these people? They ain't no good. Why, you'll just take them and they'll just hate you. They'll spit on you, curse you, and kill you. You don't want these people. How much? He asked again. Satan looked at Jesus and sneered, all your tears and all your blood. Jesus said, done. Then he paid the price. Pastor picked up the cage, he opened the door, and he walked from the pulpit. We are a giving people. We are a giving person. How do I know this? Because we follow. We dedicate our lives. We imitate Jesus, who was the ultimate giver. This is who we are. Amen. At this time, we'll let our ushers wait upon us as